when you're talking about masculinity and you're talking about how men behave, we're not supposed to be overly empathetic. We're not supposed to be that way. That's not what we're designed to do. We're literally designed to go out and kill large animals, right, and feel nothing. We're not supposed to care about Fluffy. We're not supposed to care how Fluffy looks. We're supposed to care how Fluffy tastes. And so what happens, I think, is this kind of great conflation where because women are very empathetic to each other, they think that men, in turn, are also supposed to be very empathetic. Men are not empathetic. We're not empaths. We're not supposed to be empaths. That would be very bad if we were empathetic, in fact. That would be the opposite of good. We wouldn't have been able to hunt very well, for instance, right?
I don't believe that narcissism is directly associated with gender or masculinity or femininity. It feels very fake when they do the display of empathy because they have that lack of depth when it does come to their empathy, and they will make it more obvious.
Many men have trouble conveying, for instance, and women too, right? So this argument would be used right back against you. Many people just have trouble conveying empathy. It doesn't even mean that they're not empathetic. They just have trouble with it, or they're not particularly wired to be empathetic. Men especially are not wired to be empathetic. We're not supposed to be empathetic. We're supposed to have barriers and guards from empathy for a reason. Men who are designed from the biological perspective to protect the tribe, they're going to have to kill other men, right? That's what they're wired to do, to kill other men. If they're wired to do that, how much empathy should they be bogged down with? Probably not much, right? Probably not much.
There's a difference between outwardly showing that you lack empathy and kind of embracing that quality about yourself versus lacking that empathy and making it as if that you have this empathy. And that's why I said that narcissists tend to be more charming people, because they fake that kind of empathy.
Yeah, but think about what you're saying. Imagine that you're in school, you're a young man, right? And schools are mostly overwhelmingly run by women. And most of the policies are implemented by women. You tend to see young women do really well in school and young men not do well in school. Men are penalized for things which we consider to be just fine. For instance, if a man gets up in the middle of class and drags another guy outside and beats him up, we don't really care about that. We don't consider that to be a big deal. And we never did. Even in the United States, the idea of like you punch somebody in school and you went to jail or you got suspended or expelled, that's a new thing, right? That's a new thing. So when you're talking about like rough and tumble play, things like this, imagine being in an environment where you're told that you need to be empathetic all the time. You're following a different set of rules which are designed not for your sex or how you're designed. It would be very easy for you to fall into the pattern of faking things like empathy in order to keep the people around you happy, even though there's absolutely nothing wrong with you having far less of it or not expressing it. Like when you were in school, when you guys aren't that removed from high school, who was more likely to get into fistfights, the boys or the girls?
Boys.
The boys, right? And how often were they able to become friends?
Hey, we got it.
After they got in the fist fight, how often were they able to become friends afterwards?
Guys do make up easier. That is true. Usually when girls are offended by each other, there's usually like a lot of toxic emotional behavior thereafter. So I do agree with that.
Yeah. So what happens is that men kick the shit out of each other all the time, and we just don't see a big deal with it. And we're not very empathetic about it, and we usually laugh hysterically at the guy who's on the ground and then pick his ass up and brush him off. Like, that's how we do things. Women, they don't do things that way. They're looking for empathy, things like this. But I don't really see why men need to necessarily live in a woman's world where we have to kind of pretend that empathy is this kind of primary edict, because for us, it's just really not.
Wait, Andrews, originally, do you think that women are more empathetic than men?
Well, I think that they display empathy much more than men. I think that the way that this is expressed is far different, right? I think that men can suppress their emotions far better than women can, and they're very good at doing it, and they have the chemicals in their body that make them good at doing it. And women oftentimes, even if their chemical makeup is perfect for controlling emotions, one time a month even, the chemical differential will kind of kick in, and you can see all sorts of hysterical behavior, this type of thing, just based on that alone. So yeah, I do think that men are empathetic, but I think that they display it far differently. And what I would consider empathy and what a woman would consider empathy are two very different things.
Well, excluding the outward displays of empathy, assuming there is no display of empathy, either from a man or a woman, do you think women have a greater capacity to
No, I think that it's just not countered. It's not countered. So I would say that the amount of empathy from any normal man or normal woman would be the same. But I would say that the counter that men have when they're applying things to it, different chemicals in their body to it, and then stoicism and perhaps reason, things like this, which they're rewarded for in society and always have been, they apply those traits to empathy. And I don't think that those types of barriers exist that way for women, and instead different types of barriers for different emotions exist for them. So I'm not saying that men and women aren't just as empathetic. I'm saying that you're going to think of it like a barrier that you have to walk through, one barrier, then the next barrier, then the next barrier. If all a person was empathetic, that would be terrible, right? And so these kind of displays are differentiated by what it is that men value versus women. And I think that we value reason, and we are rewarded for reason, and we're rewarded for keeping emotions under control, and women not so much. They don't really see rewards that same way. And so I think that there's kind of counters in how empathy is displayed.